liability insurance and personnel. I actually think it would be reasonable to anticipate increases in tuition over time for these child care providers to continue providing care. And these are the local providers who are doing the hard work. On the right-hand side of the screen, I tried to separate the providers that are in Park City limits versus those that are on the left that are in the Summit County boundaries. One of the ones that is not identified there just because we don't have any current allocations going to them is Deer Valley Child Care. They have had a child enrolled there that was receiving a scholarship. They're not currently enrolled, so they're not identified there, but Deer Valley has participated. Okay, and this is my slide that attempts to visualize the scholarship amounts and what families are eligible for. So when we talk about residents and their scholarships, let's assume for the sake of this visual that we have a 4-member household and that the household meets eligibility and they have a maximum $1,700 a month child care expense. So the Park City School District does provide some support for the enrollees of their preschool, and so they are that blue block right there. They will cover families up to the federal poverty level, and then DWS, the state run program, is that red block. They have a average scholarship amount of about $749, and max income limit that's just a little bit higher than the school program. And then as we talk about the couple of the recommendations that council considered today, the first one would be to eliminate the AMI. Right now we have a bit of a cutoff and a cliff when it comes to the max AMI level. If we were to eliminate that, the math would naturally result in a smaller scholarship amount than the households with a lower AMI level. That is something that council can consider to capture and provide some type of support to those families. Quite frankly, I don't know how many families would apply if the scholarships are that small. We might actually not realize much of the impact of that just because people wouldn't apply. But that is one option that the council can consider. And the other option would be to implement some type of sliding scale that would increase scholarships for the lower income, lower AMI households. We're proposing to use a sliding scale very similar to the MARC sliding scale so that the family contribution would actually decrease as their AMI decreases. You can stop me at any point, right? I'll keep going if I don't hear any questions. The next one would be workforce. So we have a couple of options for workforce support. One would be, since we have a standard $200 across the board scholarship right now for members of the Park City workforce, we could increase that. The slide right here demonstrates just a standard like $300 across the board. Again, these can be tweaked, and we'll talk about that a little bit with the second option. We could also look at something that is percentage-based. So this would be similar to resident support. We would be able to provide more support to households that have a lower income limit. The hard thing is that once we start increasing that household contribution, very similar to what the workforce provides right now towards their child care, a couple of the examples that we provided in the staff report said, those households could potentially contribute 20%, 24% of their household income towards child care. The way that it works out with the math is that it makes a very extreme cutoff, and so that it inadvertently actually decreases the max household income limit based off of the math. If you have a household income of $85,000 and you're contributing a high percentage towards child care, you may actually become ineligible at that point. And so I would just want to mention that if we look at a percentage for the workforce, we may want to think about how we cover all these households that are to the right of that line on council's slide. so that they are not eliminated and no longer eligible for the program, both the workforce and Park City municipal employees. One option that council may consider with both the standard amount and the percentage-based scholarships for workforce, one of the other things is you could tier scholarship amounts, so that it was clear for families to understand, but more so along the lines of $300 for 0 to 50% AMI, $250 for 50 to 75, and keep the $200 for the higher AMI households. And then provider support. So we've talked a little bit about increasing support for childcare providers. Nationwide, childcare support is offered from various states through various forms to cover everything from personnel, insurance, capital expenses, and more. Rather than going into businesses' books and qualifying what those expenses are, some of the recommendations that we have here for you are to, one, sort those employees, look at recruitment, retention for childcare providers, consider whether or not the full-time employees of enrolled childcare providers located within Park City limits for children enrolled in those Park City facilities would be eligible for a scholarship that's equivalent to the resident rate. And then the other option would be to provide incentives to the providers, very similar to the DWS incentive that we provide providers right now. Provide a $100 child care incentive to the providers who are caring for children within Park City limits that are enrolled in the program. And so that would include both resident and workforce children. And to recognize the fact that thus far, providers have received about 11-12% of the allocations that we've provided. And also recognizing that our local child care providers are very, very similar to what we're seeing statewide. In the state of Utah, 83% of them are small businesses with less than 20 employees. Generally, 70 to 75% of their revenue goes straight towards personnel compensation. So one of the things that council may consider is actually offering this child care incentive to those providers retroactively at the beginning of the fiscal year. We also recognize the fact that one of the things that Park City has required of our local providers is backflow preventers, something that's very important for the purposes of water quality and safety. It's also costly, and so in addition, that's compounding some of the stress to our local providers in addition to other increasing liability insurance and other expenses. Cover different amounts of their child care expenses based off of tiers that reflect the number of children in the household. And we can discuss this a little bit more if we want to break down those tiers and those numbers. Really right now, we've seen historical average number of children per household being 1.18, so the vast majority have one child. Right now, we have 1.07 average children per household participating in the program. So that means we have 6 out of 92 households that currently have 2 children. We don't have any households that have 3 or more participating in the program. But if we wanted to adjust the percentage for those households that they would potentially contribute, in essence, a 1% adjustment based off of the average income of all participating households would equate to about $75 for the household. And then ongoing funding. And so question number 8 is about ongoing funding. It is something that I think is probably the most key and most important question, in my opinion, for council to consider. Thus far, we've been telling families that funding has been available on a first-come, first-served basis. It is not guaranteed, and if the program were to continue, and if we wanted to give families some reassurance as to what the future may hold regarding this program, I think this is helpful. If additional funding is not, I think it would be something that we would want to talk through proactively and make sure that the families understand when that any adjustments would be happening, and if the program would sunset, how to phase that out. And that leads me to the 8 questions that we have for council to navigate through. Council may consider all, some, none of the recommendations that we have here, and so I welcome feedback and guidance on which ones you may want to focus on and how you want to prioritize those.
Thanks, Michelle. That was a great staff report, and great presentation. You know, as I think back to when the council first decided to do this, and we didn't really know what we didn't know, and we're just kind of stepping out there. One of the things that we really wanted to do was increase the percentage of families that were applying for and receiving DWS funding, and that's been successful. We've done that, and we've also had a goal of increasing capacity, and that's happened as well. So I'm really excited about this program and look forward to the conversation with the council. Let's start with questions. Does anybody have a question for Michelle?
Actually, just wanted to ask if you have a recommendation from the staff perspective, Michelle, from among the staff.
So I would say first and foremost, deciding what the ongoing funding looks like. Again, if there's not additional funding available, then I think we should have a very open, proactive conversation about how we sunset the program and phase it out gradually, so it's not abrupt and a surprise to families. If we do want to incorporate this into future budget cycles or increase funding, have to have that conversation. But some of that might be moot if we don't have ongoing funding in the future.
I mean, so assuming that we do want to continue the program, as that show my cards to say I do, I'm pretty proud of it. So, are there particular options here that are more attractive than the others?
Yeah, I would say, I would actually say number 6 to begin with. You know, we haven't provided a lot of financial support to providers. I know that we wanted to, I think originally, you know, we wanted to make sure that we prioritize and focus on families first. But as time goes on and we hear about vacancies within our current centers, and we hear about, you know, increasing insurance costs, some of our providers being dropped from insurance, and the overhead expenses that are just increasing, and as a result of the rate of general inflation, and the fact that they're really trying not to increase their tuition rates. I think one of the most helpful things that we can do to ensure that they stay viable and that we maintain the capacity that we currently have is to ensure that they receive some support.
Can we dig into that one then a little bit? Because that was the one I think I understood the least probably of how would that operate practically? Is this a grant program? How does that work?
So what we would do right now, we provide $300 a month for every child that is enrolled in DWS to the centers that are providing that care. That was started off, one, because not all centers actually accept DWS children, and it's a little bit of an administrative burden for them to take that on. And we also wanted to encourage participation in that program, and so the thought was to maintain that, but actually increase the amount of funding that's provided to these centers for residents, workforce, and PCMC employees.
To address the capital needs. So
Yes, so they could use it for operational, they could use it for capital expenses, it would not be encumbered. It would just be a lesser amount, so the DWS was 300, at least the numbers that are proposed in the staff report, recommend $100.
I gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for a great report. You know, kudos to the prior council that started this process of this child care support program. It's worked fantastically. And as the mayor noted, you know, the fact that we were able to increase the number of families that were taking advantage of the state benefits is exactly, you know, how you want to do something like this, right? So I'm going to actually take the cart and put it back behind the horse for a moment. You've got a bunch of recommendations here, but how about, and you did touch on a little bit in that last answer to Councilman Dickey's question, but you talked to us about what are we trying to solve for here? What are we trying to address? Are there 1, 2, or 3 items that we're trying to address?
Sure, so the last time we talked with council, one of the things that we wanted to come back with is really identify any needs that we're currently not meeting or can meet better, address better. And so that's what these recommendations have really aimed to focus on, and also cover all the facets of, what the program goals have tried to provide support for from the residents, workforce, Park City zone employees, in addition to the.
And since that last conversation, I can't remember if this happened just before or just after it, what the timing was in Washington DC. Has there been a change in the federal tax legislation around the dependent child care tax credit?
Yes, so incorporated within the Big Beautiful Bill, there's a section 45F that actually outlines some financial support and tax incentives for employers to provide some type of child care benefits to their employees. That may include building on-site facilities, offering some type of benefit and financial support. And in addition to that, we've had some state level conversations very early on about the upcoming legislative session in hopes that the state of Utah will also consider additional tax benefits to these child care providers. There's also an effort to look at the liability insurance expenses that are increasing at a state level to try to make it, to mitigate those expenses for child care providers. Still early on, and so we haven't seen any kind of language or anything yet, but that is a very active conversation.
Got it. And is my recollection correct that at the federal level, the total credit available is at $7,500?
For families.
For
yes.
families,
Yeah, yeah, to be able to,
Married filing jointly.
correct.
And the state of Utah has a $1,000 tax credit as well for dependent children, correct?
In addition to the 75?
Yeah.
I'm not aware.
Yeah.
I trust you.
They do, yeah. Okay, so it feels like, there's, as a society, we've really started to come around to helping address this problem, and I'm glad the city's been able to do its part. That's it for questions right now. Thank you.
Jeremy, let's move to you. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't think I do.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I got a few. Can we go back to 1 and 2, Michelle? Thank you, by the way, for that. So I look at all this as a whole, and I don't see any mathematical justification necessarily for any of these things. Like this one here, you gotta eliminate the AMI sliding scale, so that's the first one leads to the second one.
No,
We have a
so
sliding scale already, right?
not for the child care program. For residents, they contribute 10% of their household income, straight across the board regardless of household income.
And what is the rationale? I mean, you say 10%. What's the rationale of giving someone that makes $200,000?
Oh,
Other
so,
than to carry the line straight out.
sure, let me clarify. So the 10% is for residents. Residents must contribute 10% of their household income, and then they receive a scholarship amount for excess child care expenses in excess to that, up to $1,700, and that's for residents. For the workforce, they receive a standard 200 right now.
Right.
So two separate.
But you wanna make that 300, right? So that's another.
Well, potentially, that's an option.
I'm just wondering what the rationale in general on all this is to spend more money, is to help, who do we wanna help? I don't understand exactly what we're trying to do here, other than spend the money. So can you justify why you give someone that makes $200,000 help other than avoiding their property cutoff, which, I mean, I don't see any logic behind it. So can you explain why? I mean, I like the bubble part of giving more to
will leave the rationale up to the council, but really some of these recommendations were drafted in response to the desire to identify whether or not there are any other opportunities to, provide support to families.
Well, yeah, but we wanna help the right families, so this doesn't seem to. All right, go to the next one. The question's on. Why would we want, that seems arbitrary, 250, what is that?
Yeah, the 200 was just a standard number across the board, that was identified at the start of the program. Using that as kind of a, standard, you know, we could increase that, but that's why I also included that percentage-based scenario there, albeit not ideal for some reasons as well, so that you could see the different options. And again, we can tweak any one of these scenarios, based off of council's direction.
So this 3 and 4 is either or and?
Yeah, I would say that this one is gonna be an either or, whether or not we wanna identify a standard amount for, the workforce, that it can still be phased, it doesn't have to be 300 across the board for all household income levels. But we would identify either a standard amount, or we could look at something that's percentage based.
So I can speak to that for just a minute in terms of the workforce. You know, in talking with some employers and in talking with some members of our workforce, it is a carrot to get people to come drive past some of the new competitors that we might have outside of our borders to come in and work in Park City. So if we can, if that might be an incentive to keep some of the workforce that we desperately need here, then it makes sense to me.
Yeah, I get what the 300, I'm not sure, I don't know if the numbers, if there's any numerical basis for it, right? Why not, because one help people give them 500, so just wondering where you, how you arrive at 300, right, other than just that.
Yeah, it really just was an incremental increase. But if we wanted to talk about different numbers, happy to do that.
Is the 200 not working? Do we know whether we'll ask people if 200 not working, 300 would work, or is this just, you need more time to figure that out?
So I would say we've had a strong amount of participation in the program in the workforce, as strong, if not at times more workforce participating in the program than residents, and so I think it's been a successful carrot. These scenarios really were just offered as options for expanding support.
Next one, quick. Sorry. So you want to give full-time employees of the providers in PC extra help? Because why'd you pick that group?
So for the providers, and this is again, something that is a symptom statewide, it's not even necessarily local, but it is something that I think we can help with on a local level. Recruitment, retention, is a big issue for childcare providers. And being that, statewide and locally, we have so many small businesses, generally, these full-time employees, have a high turnover rate, and it's not necessarily one of the most sought after. That was another carrot to help those providers recruit and retain their employees.
That's 100 a month, right?
For the childcare provider
Provider a
employees.
week.
So the potential recommendation would be that the employees of the childcare providers in Park City that are enrolled in the program and have children enrolled in those Park City centers would receive a scholarship that's reflective of the current resident scholarship rate, the higher rate, rather than the standard workforce rate. The average resident tuition scholarship right now is about $772 versus $200.
So 100 per child, per employee, per week. I just don't know what the 100 per child incentive is. Is that a week, is that a month, is that?
So that incentive is separate. That would be something that would be offered to the centers. They would keep that funding. that is not being credited towards any child's tuition. Does that help?
No, it's per week, per month,
Month.
$200 per month for a child. I'm just wondering if it's enough to even make a dent. Seems like a small amount if it's per month, doesn't really.
So the estimates are based off of current enrollments. We have about 50 children that are enrolled in these Park City centers. And 18 of those are at Alpine Adventures. We have 32 at PC Tots. And so, you know, theoretically, we'd be looking at like $1,800 a month for Alpine Adventures and $3,200 for PC Tots, just based off of those enrollments that we have today.
But there's no designation, you said you could use capital,
Mhm.
like, and, you know, understand why we want to get involved. All right.
Well, I think the questions have been great. We are over time. This is going to have to come back, but if council has additional information that comes back, use this time, give that to Michelle.
Yeah, I would say the provider support one. And looking back at the notes that I took from our last work session, I'm still always in favor of what more we can do for the workforce and then also what we can do for our Park City municipal employees. So ensuring that those two remain top of mind.
I guess I'll weigh into this, this is not more information, but the most appealing to me, I guess, for next time, I want to talk more about the resident support, the two resident support ones, 1 and 2. Just because I think those sort of provide the level of support we were looking to when we discussed the small grants, which is really why this came back here, is that we want to fund it through the formula, not through the grants. And I think it makes the program just function better, to remove this AMI caps, that functioning sort of works the same. And then the sliding scale avoids the cutoffs and just recognizes that, you know, extremely low income families, that percentage would be different towards people. So one and two are kind of where I'm leaning to just, it makes a more effective program and it provides sort of a modest increase in spending.
And Michelle, I'd ask, you know, if there's additional conversation about increasing the workforce scholarship, that you come back with an update from our, you know, partners who are working with both Chamber and on a program to have employers create, you know, there's some tax legislation that you said would create some benefits. So we'd love to get an update, like, I'm happy